Point Zero Forum, Zurich, 1st to the 3rd of July, 2024. Shaping Finance's Future with Digital Public Infrastructure, the Role of Tokenized Money and Public-Private Collaboration. Now, this is a very interesting and hard to follow introduction here. Payments is a critical field for DPI. For centuries, cash has fulfilled a fundamental role in societies as a public payment infrastructure. Today, the ability to send and receive money digitally, and by money, I assume they are referring to the digital version of that cash, has become an essential capability for individual societies and economies. In the digital economy, tokenized money, which is not the same thing you'll note as digital cash, might act as an enabler of DPI that can drive economic value while enhancing the public welfare, which sounds awfully Chinese. When we start examining this, we're talking about something that brings together, as they say, the unique identity of people, a scalable flow of data between institutions, and a secure infrastructure for digital payments. I think in essence, what we're seeing here is an idea that we can dispense with the blockchain and just put some nice sort of imagery around it that makes it look blockchainy, but actually what we're really talking about here is an evolution of money from that which we have been debasing for the last 50 years, 60 years, into something that we can actually use as a tool for controlling people. That's the creepy aspect of what I'm taking from this, that this is very much something that the Chinese Communist Party might have written themselves.
So in a sense, I mean, we certainly are old enough to have lived through a massive transition. And I started thinking back to the time when I was a CTO at a UK company, and we had a US customer that tried to pay an invoice by sending us an American banker's check, which is a horrible way to get paid, because you actually have to mail that check back to the bank to get it approved. And you have to wait weeks, months even, to actually get the money in your bank account, and it's going to cost you too. And I still have some lingering Ericsson shares. Some Ireland-based companies keep sending me cashier's checks for like $1 or something. It's a ridiculous amount that actually cashing the check is going to be more expensive. So suddenly we have this new potential where we can, we can tokenize cash. We can create new financial instruments on the fly. We can start tracking unique identity of people. All this can be either extremely liberating or extremely horrible, depending on where the technology goes. And I think, at least for me, what really needs to happen is that we try to get back to basics and fundamental economic principles and what we actually know about human psychology, and not start imagining that we live in an entirely different world from yesterday.
Great point. You know, you were saying that effectively what we're talking about here is programmable money, and potentially its object is programmable people, programmable, controllable people. And it shouldn't be any source of wonder that the EU SSR's favorite commissariat, the European Commission, is driving a lot of this agenda. Well, you have to ask the question, you know, you said a moment ago, this could be a great liberating force or a great controlling force. Is there a major state anywhere in the world right now that you would trust to liberate rather than control? I mean, I said about the Chinese Communist Party would like to have written this, but would you honestly say that the Democrat Party in the US is any different in terms of its objectives and intent? Would you say that in fact, you don't even need to point at the Democrat Party, you just point at the Uni Party that is the melding of Republican and Democrat. I don't have to agree with everything he says, but I think the emergence of Robert Kennedy Jr. as a candidate is actually refreshing, because even if he's wrong about Bitcoin, he's right to be asking the question about how these things are working. Programmable money means programmable people. Where you hear programmable money, you hear programmable people.
Mm-hmm.
Because now we can control the very thing that allows you to operate. You know, you talked about money being like energy in a battery. It's what
Mm-hmm.
allows you to buy the things you need, pay for the bills you have. It's what keeps you moving forward. But if all of a sudden your access to that and your capacity to use that is restricted because actually somebody saw you dropping litter on the floor the other day, or you misgendered somebody in a conversation, you know, that this has happened in Ireland, which has become the most or the least liberal state in Europe. They introduced legislation on hate speech, and hate is defined as hate. So whoever feels like it on the day can define it however they feel like, because it's a circular reference. And you can be arrested for this, and you can be tried. I mean, we are deep into the realms of, I don't even think that when George Orwell conceived 1984, he had such a nightmare state of technology in mind. I mean, if you could actually control how people are allowed to access their money, what else do you control? Everything. I mean, is there something you don't control? You can switch off any person at any time.
Mm-hmm.
For what?
Mhm.
For anything you choose.
Right. So you have to ask, programmable money, but programmable to what end? What was the deficiency in freely tradable money that's being corrected here? And that's very clearly only a centralization of control problem that they perceive. Phrases that are dropped in that sentence, such as public welfare, are subject to something we call the canon conjugate. The canon conjugate means that the meaning of a phrase changes entirely based on which perspective you're at. So if you are a centralized authority, public welfare means taking care of the party. It doesn't have anything to do, it means how well is the public serving the party. It has nothing to do with the members of the public. That's not what it means. And that's a perspective-driven issue. So there's a lot of magic tricks and linguistics there. And they're all folded into this weird introduction.
Yeah,
But
as I like to point out, the crypto industry didn't lick magical wording off a stone. It took it from others who mastered it before them.
mhm,
Yeah, and we've also seen in the blockchain space around public ID, there is this topic, self-sovereign identity, where
mhm,
the idea, or at least in theory, is that every individual gets to control their own information. And the blockchains can actually open up this as a possibility globally. But what happens in the standardization work is that essentially you get paid by the EU or whatever, and all the usual suspects roll in with their existing infrastructures and try to own the problem. This is what happens with all major standardization, and where essentially you end up with something that more looks like the digital ID infrastructure that is currently most developed in China. And so the big issue that we always fall back to is, what problem are we trying to solve here?
Well,
Not just
I
this
think
shiny technology, how can we adapt it the way we normally do?
I think one of the interesting things to examine here is when people talk about Web 2 versus Web 3, and I appreciate that you guys really object to that phraseology, but it's what's used in the market. And Web 2 effectively is a world in which most things seem to be free or very low cost because you indeed are the product, your data.
Mhm.
And AI, large language models, not AI, forgive me, applied machine learning in the form of large language models is your data being monetized at scale at enormous. One of the things I do find very entertaining about this entire discussion in point zero is a lot of it is about AI and ESG. And nobody seems to be connecting the dots there, that actually
Mm.
large language model systems are consuming far more energy than Bitcoin and Ethereum on acid. And nobody is talking about that. But let's put that to one side for a second. The idea of Web3 is that you own your data, you own you, and you own your assets, which is very distinct from programmable money. Something like the Gaju, which is something that is money that is yours. If it's in your wallet, it's yours. With Web3, we are supposed to own our data, own our assets, and pay for utility where we find it, which might be a micropayment. It might be 1/100th of a cent for something, but we pay for our utility where we find it, and in so doing, we preserve our own privacy, our own data, our own person. I think what we're seeing here, and you're right, it's really trying to follow the Chinese Communist Party version, which is the most developed of them all. And we end up in this situation of social credits and various other means of scoring citizens and deciding whether or not they are sufficiently good. And I think it's really worrisome what direction this is going to take. Ulf, you've made some very good erudite critiques of this digital representation of the individual, the idea of this unique identity of people. Would you like to expand on that just a little bit in the last minute or so of this call?
So, I mean, on a true blockchain that is really decentralized, you can indeed own your own identity, where as an individual, you decide what you need to publish. And with zero knowledge proofs, you can even essentially provide a proof of saying that you're an eligible voter in a certain election or whatever, without revealing anything more than that. So these are possibilities, but we need to make sure that this is what the discussion is actually about. How to allow individuals to take back control of their own lives.
Yeah, I think maybe there's a conditioned issue in this, that, for example, the EU came up with GDPR. And what that essentially says is that all of these data controllers own your data, but you have the right to ask them what information they have about you and ask that it not be used. And it's really not, it's not really a functional framework at all. It's something that's used as a threat a lot of the time, but it isn't really a truly functional framework. And it starts from the wrong position, which is that the only control you have over your data is, some say, if you can find the appropriate person that controls your data over what they're doing with your data. In actual fact, you need to start from a completely different perspective, which is that my data is mine, yours is yours. And it should never be in anybody else's hands without your express permission, not your implied permission.
And we would love to start demonstrating our concept of using the Gajumaru as your infrastructure for login to various systems, where you can do truly anonymous login and have very tight control over what you allow various vendors on the system to know about you. And starting from there, starting from essentially zero knowledge. The only thing I will share with you right now is I have the private key to sign this login message. And then we'll go from there.
Gentlemen, thank you for your time.